You'll never be leadership material, Alex. Some people are just born followers. My name is Alex Chen, and I'm 31 years old. I work as the Regional Operations Director for Meridian Logistics, a supply chain management company based in Denver, Colorado. But 6 years ago, when I was a junior analyst in the same company, my supervisor, Garrett said those exact words to me during my annual performance review. He delivered them with a smug smile, leaning back in his leather chair like he was doing me a favor by crushing my dreams. I had just presented a comprehensive plan to streamline our inventory management system, something I'd worked on for 3 months, staying late every night, analyzing data patterns and cost projections. The plan could have saved the company nearly $2 million annually. Garrett barely glanced at it before sliding it back across his desk. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," he said, tapping the folder dismissively. "You think too small? Leaders see the big picture. They don't get bogged down in spreadsheets and minor process improvements." I sat there in his corner office, looking out at the Denver skyline through his floor-to-ceiling windows, feeling about 2 inches tall. At 25, I was one of the youngest employees in the logistics department, fresh out of Colorado State with a degree in operations management and more determination than experience. I believed hard work and good ideas would speak for themselves. I was wrong. Garrett had been with Meridian for 8 years at that point, climbing from senior analyst to department supervisor through what seemed like a combination of office politics and strategic networking rather than actual competence. He was 34, tall, confident, and had the kind of easy charm that made executives remember his name. He wore expensive suits, drove a BMW, and had pictures on his desk with various company VPs at golf tournaments and charity events. "Look, Alex," he continued, softening his tone like he was mentoring a confused child. "You're good at what you do, detail-oriented, reliable, punctual. These are valuable qualities for support staff. But leadership requires vision, charisma, the ability to inspire people. It's not something you can learn from a textbook." He gave me a rating of meets expectations on my review, the corporate equivalent of mediocre. No promotion, no raise beyond the standard 2% cost of living adjustment, no recommendation for the leadership development program I'd specifically requested. "Maybe focus on becoming the best analyst you can be," he suggested as I gathered my rejected proposal. "There's honor in knowing your place." I walked back to my cramped cubicle in the bullpen, surrounded by the hum of fluorescent lights and the constant clicking of keyboards. My desk was wedged between the copier and the supply closet, hardly the throne room of someone with leadership potential. But as I sat down and stared at my computer screen, something cold and determined settled in my chest. Garrett Whitfield had just made the biggest mistake of his career. He had no idea what he'd just unleashed. Over the next few months, Garrett's dismissiveness became a pattern. Every suggestion I made was either ignored or credited to someone else. When I proposed implementing barcode scanning for our warehouse operations, Garrett presented it to senior management as his own innovation. When I identified a vendor billing discrepancy that saved us $150,000, he made sure his name was on the memo to corporate. But the real humiliation came during team meetings. Garrett had a way of making me invisible while ensuring everyone else felt valued. He'd ask for input from every person around the conference table, systematically skipping over me like I wasn't there. If I spoke up anyway, he'd interrupt with phrases like, "Let's hear from someone with more experience," or, "That's an interesting perspective, but let's think bigger." The worst incident happened during our quarterly presentation to the executive team. I'd spent weeks preparing analysis on supply chain inefficiencies across our 3 Colorado facilities. The data clearly showed where we were hemorrhaging money and exactly how to fix it. Garrett reviewed my presentation the night before and told me it was solid work. The next morning, I arrived at the boardroom to find Garrett delivering my presentation to VP Rebecca Torres and Operations Director Michael Chen. My slides, my analysis, my solutions, all flowing from his mouth with practiced confidence. "This kind of strategic thinking is exactly what we need more of," VP Torres said, clearly impressed. Garrett nodded humbly. "I believe in taking a comprehensive approach to operational challenges. I sat in the back corner, watching my career advancement being stolen in real time. When the presentation ended, Garrett caught my eye and gave me a small nod. Not acknowledgement, but a reminder of my place in the hierarchy. After the executives left, I confronted him in his office. That was my work, Garrett. My analysis, my recommendations. He closed the door and turned to face me with an expression of practiced patience. Alex, you contributed data. I provided the strategic framework and executive perspective. That's how teams work. Junior staff support senior leadership. Support? You didn't change a single slide. Leadership isn't about who creates the slides. It's about who can sell the vision. You think VP Torres would have been as receptive if those ideas came from a junior analyst? I was protecting your work by presenting it properly. I stared at him, realizing this wasn't incompetence or oversight. This was calculated, systematic. Garrett wasn't just dismissing my potential. He was actively sabotaging it while positioning himself as my protector. One day, I said quietly, you're going to regret underestimating me. He laughed, a sound that still echoes in my memory. Alex, ambition without capability is just wishful thinking. Focus on being the best analyst you can be. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. To understand why Garrett's dismissal cut so deep, you need to know where I came from. I wasn't born into privilege or handed opportunities. My parents, David and Linda Chen, immigrated from Taiwan in the 1980s, meeting in Denver where they both worked multiple jobs to build something from nothing. My father worked nights at a manufacturing plant while studying for his engineering degree during the day. My mother cleaned offices while taking English classes and raising 2 children. They taught me that respect is earned through excellence, that hard work speaks louder than words, and that competence always wins in the end. When other kids were playing after school, I was helping my parents with their paperwork while they helped me with homework. We were a team, each person's success lifting the whole family. By the time I graduated high school, I had already been working part-time for 3 years, first as a grocery store stock clerk, then as a data entry assistant for my uncle's small import business. I learned early that nobody hands you anything, but if you prove your value consistently, eventually people notice. Colorado State University was my dream school, but we couldn't afford the full tuition. I worked 25 hours a week at a campus logistics center while maintaining a 3.8 GPA in operations management. My professors recognized something in me, a hunger to understand how complex systems actually work, not just how they're supposed to work on paper. Professor Robert Martinez became my mentor during junior year. He was a former operations executive who had built his career optimizing supply chains for Fortune 500 companies before transitioning to academia. Alex, he told me during office hours one afternoon, you have the kind of analytical mind that sees patterns others miss. But more importantly, you understand that behind every spreadsheet are real people whose lives improve when systems work better. He recommended me for an internship at Meridian Logistics during my senior year. The company was growing rapidly, expanding from regional freight coordination to comprehensive supply chain management for major retailers. It was exactly the kind of dynamic environment where a smart, hungry graduate could make an impact. I started as a summer intern in the analysis department, working directly under the previous supervisor, Janet Morrison. Janet was a straight-talking woman in her 50s who had worked her way up from dispatcher to department head over 20 years. She believed in meritocracy. If you could do the job, you got the job. The logistics industry needs people who understand both the numbers and the human element. Janet told me during my first week, you seem to get both. Under Janet's mentorship, I thrived. She gave me real projects with real consequences, trusted my judgment, and when I made mistakes, she helped me learn from them rather than covering for me. When Janet retired and Garrett took over, everything changed. After the presentation theft, I started paying closer attention to Garrett's patterns. What I discovered was disturbing and systematic. He wasn't just taking credit for my work. He was building an entire career on the contributions of others while carefully managing his image with upper management. I began documenting everything. Every email, every meeting, every interaction. I created a private folder on my personal laptop, tracking dates, witnesses, and outcomes. What emerged was a clear picture of someone who had mastered the art of corporate manipulation. Garrett's strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. He would identify the strongest performers in the department, assign them complex projects under the guise of development opportunities, then present their work to executives as evidence of his leadership effectiveness. Meanwhile, he made sure those same high performers remained invisible to decision-makers. Take Kevin Rodriguez, a logistics coordinator who had designed an innovative route optimization algorithm. Garrett presented Kevin's work at an industry conference, winning recognition as an innovation leader. Kevin wasn't even invited to attend the conference, where his own creation was being celebrated. Or Sarah Martinez, whose vendor relationship management system had reduced procurement costs by 12% across all facilities. Garrett's quarterly report to corporate highlighted this achievement prominently, under his name, while Sarah remained stuck in her coordinator role with no promotion prospects. The pattern extended beyond stolen credit. Garrett systematically excluded high-potential employees from networking opportunities while ensuring his own visibility at every company event. He volunteered to represent our department at trade shows, client meetings, and executive briefings. He joined the company golf league and the leadership book club. He made himself indispensable to the right people while keeping talented subordinates buried in operational tasks. But his most insidious tactic was emotional manipulation disguised as mentorship. He would pull aside promising employees for career guidance conversations where he'd subtly undermine their confidence while positioning himself as their only advocate. "The executive team isn't ready for someone like you yet," he told Kevin during one of these sessions. "But I'm working behind the scenes to change their perceptions. Trust me to manage your career trajectory." Kevin believed him. They all did. Garrett had perfected the art of being simultaneously their obstacle and their supposed salvation. I realized I was witnessing something darker than simple office politics. This was predatory leadership. Someone who had identified that the fastest path to promotion wasn't building teams or developing talent, but consuming it. The breaking point came during our department's annual budget planning session. I had prepared a comprehensive analysis showing how we could reduce operational costs by 18% through strategic vendor consolidation and facility optimization. The plan was detailed, data-driven, and could save Meridian over $3 million annually. Garrett reviewed my work privately, asked detailed questions about implementation timelines and risk factors, then scheduled a meeting with VP Torres to discuss his vision for departmental efficiency improvements. This time, I was ready. I knew confronting Garrett directly would be pointless. He'd already proven he could twist any situation to his advantage while making me look like a disgruntled employee who couldn't handle constructive feedback. If I wanted to expose him, I needed evidence that couldn't be dismissed or rationalized away. My first step was building allies among my colleagues, not by complaining about Garrett. That would only make me look unprofessional, but by quietly offering support and documenting our shared experiences. I started having coffee meetings with Kevin, Sarah, and others who had been systematically marginalized. Without directly criticizing Garrett, I asked questions about their career goals and frustrations. The stories that emerged painted a consistent picture. "I feel like I'm working in a black hole," Sarah confided during lunch at the cafe downstairs. "I produce results, but nothing I do seems to matter to anyone who could actually help my career." Kevin was more direct. "Sometimes I wonder if Garrett actively doesn't want us to succeed, like our achievements somehow threaten him." I also began researching Garrett's background more thoroughly. His LinkedIn profile was impressive. 8 years at Meridian, steady promotions, glowing recommendations from executives. But when I looked deeper, patterns emerged that raised questions. His previous role at a logistics company in Phoenix had ended abruptly after only 14 months. The company's annual report from that year mentioned leadership restructuring in their operations division. His role before that lasted just 11 months before another mysterious departure. Through professional networks, I connected with former colleagues from both companies. The conversations were revealing, though people were careful about what they said directly. "Garrett is very strategic about managing relationships," said one former coworker from Phoenix. "He's excellent at presenting ideas to leadership." When I pressed for specifics, he was hesitant, but eventually shared. Let's just say there were questions about project attribution and team dynamics before he left. The picture became clearer. Garrett's entire career was built on a pattern of short-term value extraction. Join a company, identify the strongest performers, consume their work to build his reputation, then move on before the damage became too obvious. But at Meridian, he had found something different. A growing company with strong revenues, executive leaders who valued stability over deep investigation, and a department full of talented people who weren't politically sophisticated enough to protect themselves. He had settled in for a long-term extraction operation. I also started paying attention to Garrett's relationships with senior leadership. He had cultivated particularly strong ties with Vice President Rebecca Torres, who appreciated his polished presentations and confident demeanor. She often praised his strategic thinking and team leadership in company-wide meetings. What she didn't know was that every strategic insight she attributed to Garrett had originated from one of his subordinates. The investigation phase taught me something crucial. Garrett's power wasn't based on competence or vision. It was based on information asymmetry and relationship management. He controlled what information reached decision-makers and how it was presented. If I wanted to beat him, I needed to change the information flow. The smoking gun came from an unexpected source, Garrett's own arrogance. It was a Thursday evening in March, and I was working late on a quarterly efficiency report. Most of the office had cleared out, but I could hear voices from Garrett's corner office. He was on a phone call, speaking loudly enough that I could catch fragments through his partially open door. I moved closer under the pretense of using the printer near his office. What I heard made my blood run cold. Exactly what I told them would happen, Garrett was saying. The vendor consolidation proposal was brilliant. Saved them $3 million just like I predicted. Vendor consolidation proposal? There was no vendor consolidation proposal from him. There was my strategic efficiency plan, which I had submitted under my name 3 weeks earlier. No, he's just a junior analyst, he continued. Smart enough to crunch numbers, but no strategic vision. I had to completely restructure his data to make it actionable for executive leadership. I pulled out my phone and started recording. The key is managing these people properly, Garrett said, his tone taking on the confidence of someone who thought he was speaking privately. You give them technical assignments, let them feel useful, then translate their work into actual business strategy. They get job satisfaction, I get results, everyone wins. There was a pause as the other person spoke. Of course I'm getting promoted, Garrett laughed. Torres basically told me the operations director position is mine when Chen retires next year. This vendor consolidation success sealed it. My vendor consolidation success. Look, Derek, he continued, the secret to management is understanding that most people are followers by nature. They want to contribute, but they need leaders to give their work meaning and context. I'm not stealing anything. I'm adding value through strategic positioning. Derek. I recognized that name. Derek Caldwell, Garrett's former supervisor from Phoenix who now worked at a consulting firm in Seattle. Garrett was basically giving a masterclass in corporate theft to his mentor. The Chen kid is a perfect example, he said. Brilliant analytical mind, zero leadership potential. He actually thanked me for helping him present his ideas more effectively to senior management. He has no idea how the real world works. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes. Garrett laid out his entire system, how he identified high-potential employees, isolated them from decision-makers, consumed their work, and managed their careers to prevent them from becoming threats. The beautiful thing is, they never see it coming, he said. By the time they realize what's happening, I'm already 3 levels above them with relationships they'll never reach. I stood there in the hallway, recording every word, feeling a mixture of rage and vindication. This wasn't just about me. This was a systematic operation that had been running for years. When Garrett finally ended the call, I slipped back to my desk and immediately backed up the recording to 3 different cloud storage accounts. For the first time in months, I smiled. Garrett had just handed me everything I needed to destroy him. That recording was nuclear, but I knew I couldn't just march into VP Torres's office and play it. Corporate politics doesn't work that way. Garrett had spent years building relationships and managing his image. A single recording from a junior employee could easily be dismissed as taken out of context or motivated by personal grievance. I needed a comprehensive strategy that would not only expose Garrett, but position me as the obvious replacement for his role. This required careful planning and perfect execution. My first call was to Professor Robert Martinez at Colorado State. He had transitioned from corporate consulting to academia precisely because he'd witnessed too many talented people get crushed by systems that rewarded politics over performance. "Alex, what you're describing isn't uncommon," he said during our coffee meeting off campus. "But building a case against someone in Garrett's position requires more than evidence of wrongdoing. You need to demonstrate clear value creation that can't be disputed." He connected me with Dr. Susan Wright, a former operations executive who now taught leadership courses and consulted on organizational development. Dr. Wright had seen similar situations throughout her 30-year career. "The key is creating an independent track record of achievement that bypasses your supervisor entirely," she advised. "You need to find ways to add value directly to senior leadership while documenting everything you do." I also reached out to my network of former Colorado State classmates who were working in logistics and supply chain roles at other companies. Through these connections, I learned about industry best practices, emerging trends, and strategic initiatives that were generating results elsewhere. But the most important element of my strategy was time. I needed to be patient, methodical, and completely professional throughout the process. Any hint of emotion or personal vendetta would undermine my credibility. I created a detailed timeline spanning 12 months. Phase 1 involved building undeniable competence and visibility within the company. Phase 2 focused on creating strategic relationships with senior leadership. Phase 3 would involve systematically documenting Garrett's pattern of credit theft. The final phase would present all evidence simultaneously while positioning myself as the natural solution to the leadership vacuum. During this planning period, I also began working on my own professional development. I enrolled in evening classes for project management certification and supply chain optimization. I joined professional organizations like the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals and started attending industry conferences on my own time and budget. Every presentation I attended, every case study I analyzed, every best practice I learned became ammunition for what I was building. I also started keeping meticulous records of every project, every idea, every contribution I made. Not just the final outputs, but the entire development process, initial research, methodology, iterations, and implementation recommendations. I wanted an undeniable paper trail showing the evolution of my thinking and work. The most challenging part was maintaining normal interactions with Garrett while executing this strategy. I had to nod, take his feedback graciously, and continue producing excellent work while he took credit for it. Every stolen presentation, every dismissed suggestion, every condescending comment was a fuel for what was coming. While building my own professional foundation, I also conducted a systematic investigation into Garrett's operation. The goal wasn't just to prove he was stealing credit. It was to document the full scope of his impact on the department and company. I started with financial analysis. Using my access to departmental budgets and performance metrics, I traced every major cost saving, efficiency improvement, and process optimization that had been attributed to Garrett's leadership over the past 3 years. Then I cross-referenced those achievements with project files, email chains, and meeting notes to identify their true origins. The results were staggering. Of the $8.2 million in cost savings and efficiency improvements attributed to Garrett's strategic leadership, less than $300,000 could be directly traced to his actual contributions. The rest came from ideas and implementations developed by subordinates whose work he had systematically appropriated. Kevin's route optimization algorithm alone had saved the company $2.3 million annually. Sarah's vendor management system had reduced procurement costs by $1.8 million per year. My own inventory management improvements had generated $2.1 million in savings. 3 other colleagues had contributed the remaining achievements. But the investigation revealed something even more damaging: talent hemorrhaging. In the 3 years since Garrett became supervisor, The department had lost 12 high-performing employees to other companies. The exit interview reports, which I accessed through my friendship with Linda Park in HR, painted a consistent picture of frustration with limited advancement opportunities and lack of recognition for contributions. Each departure had cost Meridian approximately $85,000 in recruiting, training, and lost productivity. Garrett's management style wasn't just stealing credit. It was literally costing the company millions in talent retention. I also discovered that several of our former colleagues had gone on to achieve significant success at other companies. Maria Santos, who left 18 months earlier, was now a senior director at a competing logistics firm. James Morrison had been promoted to vice president at a Fortune 500 retailer. These were people with the same skills and backgrounds as our current team, but they had flourished once removed from Garrett's suppressive management. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became that Garrett wasn't just a credit thief. He was actively damaging organizational performance. His management approach was creating a brain drain that was hurting Meridian's competitive position. Through industry connections, I also learned more about his previous positions. The leadership restructuring in Phoenix had occurred after 3 senior analysts quit within 6 months, citing concerns about workplace culture and recognition. His departure from the previous company happened just weeks before an internal audit that had identified discrepancies in project attribution and performance metrics. Garrett had been running the same playbook for years, staying one step ahead of accountability by changing companies before the full damage became visible. But at Meridian, he had finally stayed too long. The evidence was overwhelming, and I had documented everything. Now I needed to create the perfect opportunity to present it all. The opportunity I needed came in the form of Meridian's annual Strategic Innovation Challenge. VP Rebecca Torres announced the company-wide initiative during our March all-hands meeting. Each department would submit proposals for major operational improvements, with winning ideas receiving full implementation funding and recognition at the corporate level. This is our chance to identify the next generation of leadership talent, Torres explained. We want bold thinking, innovative solutions, and strategic vision that will position Meridian for the next decade of growth. Perfect. This was exactly the platform I needed. I spent 2 weeks developing a comprehensive proposal that went far beyond typical operational improvements. Instead of focusing on a single process or system, I created an integrated transformation plan that addressed supply chain optimization, talent management, and organizational effectiveness simultaneously. The proposal included 3 major components. First, a technology integration system that would reduce logistics costs by 25% while improving delivery accuracy. Second, a performance management framework that properly attributed contributions and created clear advancement pathways. Third, a knowledge retention program that would stop the talent hemorrhaging our department had experienced. But here's where I got strategic. I made sure Garrett knew about the proposal well in advance of the submission deadline. I've been working on something for the Innovation Challenge, I told him during our regular Monday meeting. I'd love to get your feedback before finalizing it. I presented a simplified version that focused only on the technology integration component. Garrett's eyes lit up immediately. He could see the potential impact and, more importantly, the potential credit he could claim. This has real potential, Alex, he said, reviewing the materials with unusual enthusiasm. But it needs more strategic framing. Let me work with you to position this properly for senior leadership. Over the next week, I let Garrett believe he was mentoring me through the refinement process. He suggested modifications to the presentation format, recommended emphasizing certain benefits over others, and helped me improve the executive summary. In reality, I was documenting every interaction, every suggestion, every claim of collaborative development. Meanwhile, I submitted my complete proposal, all 3 components, directly to the Innovation Challenge portal under my name alone. The system automatically timestamped submissions and maintained audit trails of all changes and contributors. Then I waited. The setup was perfect. Garrett would inevitably try to claim credit for the technology component, believing that was the full extent of my submission. When the review committee saw the complete proposal with its comprehensive approach to organizational improvement, it would be clear who had developed the strategic vision and who was merely trying to attach himself to someone else's work. But I had one more card to play. The week before final presentations, I scheduled individual meetings with key executives to discuss implementation challenges related to my proposal. It was time to build direct relationships with decision-makers, bypassing Garrett completely. The confrontation came during the Innovation Challenge presentations, held in Meridian's executive conference room on the top floor. All department heads, VPs, and C-level executives were present. Garrett had insisted on presenting our technology proposal, confident he understood the full scope of my submission. I watched from the audience as he stood at the front of the room, clicking through slides that represented months of my work. His presentation was polished, confident, and completely focused on the logistics optimization component. This integrated approach to supply chain technology represents a fundamental shift in how we think about operational efficiency, Garrett said, gesturing toward a flowchart that had taken me weeks to develop. By combining predictive analytics with automated routing systems, we can achieve unprecedented cost savings while improving service delivery. VP Torres nodded approvingly. This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need. How did you develop this framework? It required extensive analysis of our current inefficiencies and research into emerging industry practices, Garrett replied smoothly. I worked closely with my team, particularly Alex Chen, who helped compile some of the technical data. 6 months of comprehensive analysis reduced to a footnote. When Garrett finished his presentation to scattered applause, Torres looked at the agenda. I believe we have one more proposal from the logistics department. Alex Chen. Garrett's face went pale. He looked back at me with confusion and something approaching panic. Actually, I said, standing and walking to the front, I submitted a separate proposal that builds on some similar concepts, but takes a more comprehensive approach. I connected my laptop to the projection system and began my presentation. The title slide read, Integrated Organizational Excellence, a 3-pillar approach to sustainable growth. For the next 20 minutes, I laid out my complete vision. The technology integration Garrett had just presented was only the first pillar. The second pillar addressed talent management and recognition systems, with specific recommendations for improving employee retention and advancement opportunities. The third pillar focused on knowledge management and organizational learning. But the real moment came when I reached the implementation timeline slide. This proposal builds on analysis I've been conducting over the past 18 months, I said, making eye contact with each executive. I've identified patterns in our talent retention, project attribution, and leadership development that directly impact our competitive position. I clicked to the next slide, a chart showing the $8.2 million in improvements attributed to various managers versus the documented origins of those improvements. Effective leadership requires not just implementing good ideas, but fostering the conditions where good ideas can emerge and be properly developed. The room was completely silent. Garrett sat frozen in his chair, realizing that his entire management approach was being dissected in front of the company's senior leadership. VP Torres leaned forward. This is remarkably comprehensive, Alex. How long did this analysis take? 6 months of detailed research and documentation, plus ongoing tracking of key performance indicators. The reaction in the room was immediate and electric. VP Rebecca Torres was asking pointed questions about methodology and implementation timelines. Operations Director Michael Chen was taking notes and nodding approvingly. Even CEO Patricia Williams, who rarely attended departmental presentations, was leaning forward with obvious interest. This kind of systems thinking is exactly what we need at the senior leadership level, Torres said. Alex, I'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss implementation details. Garrett tried to interject. I think there's been some confusion about collaboration and project development. I don't think there's any confusion, Chen interrupted, looking directly at Garrett. The submission records show clear timestamps and individual attribution. What I'm seeing here is a significant mismatch between claims and documentation. After the presentation, Torres asked me to stay behind while others filed out. Garrett lingered near the door, clearly wanting to participate in the conversation, but Torres's expression made it clear he was dismissed. "Alex, I'm going to be direct," Torres said once we were alone. "What you've presented suggests some serious issues with project attribution and management effectiveness in your department. Are you prepared to discuss this frankly?" This was the moment I had been preparing for. I remained calm and professional. "I believe there are opportunities to improve how we recognize and develop talent," I said carefully. "My analysis suggests that clearer attribution and advancement processes would benefit both individual performance and organizational outcomes." Torres nodded. "I'm going to ask HR to conduct a comprehensive review of project documentation and performance metrics in your department. Are you comfortable being a primary resource for that review?" "Absolutely." Within 48 hours, the HR investigation was underway. Linda Park from Human Resources contacted me to schedule interviews and requested access to all documentation I had compiled. The investigation also included interviews with Kevin, Sarah, and other colleagues about their experiences with project attribution and recognition. Meanwhile, Garrett's behavior became erratic. He called an emergency team meeting where he attempted to clarify misunderstandings about collaborative work processes. He sent multiple emails to senior leadership emphasizing his role in developing junior talent and ensuring proper mentorship. But the damage was done. The Innovation Challenge had created a public record of the disconnect between Garrett's claims and documented reality. More importantly, it had demonstrated my capability to think strategically and communicate effectively with senior leadership. 3 weeks later, Torres called me into her office with life-changing news. "Alex, we've completed our review of departmental performance and management practices. Based on our findings, we're making some significant organizational changes. Michael Chen has decided to accelerate his retirement timeline, and we need someone to step into the operations director role immediately." She paused, studying my expression. "We'd like you to consider taking on that position. You'd be Garrett's supervisor, among other responsibilities." That conversation happened 2 years ago. Today I'm sitting in my corner office on the 15th floor of Meridian's headquarters, reviewing Garrett's annual performance evaluation. The same corner office where he once told me I'd never be leadership material. The irony isn't lost on me. After accepting the operations director position, I had to make some difficult decisions about departmental restructuring. Garrett's role was eliminated as part of a broader reorganization focused on flattening hierarchy and improving direct communication between high-performing analysts and senior management. I offered him a choice: accept a lateral move to a senior analyst position with clear performance expectations, or pursue opportunities elsewhere with a neutral reference. He chose to stay, perhaps hoping to rebuild his reputation under new leadership. Working with Garrett as his supervisor has been educational. Stripped of his ability to steal credit and manage information flow, his actual contributions became visible to everyone. He's competent at tactical execution, but lacks the strategic vision and ethical foundation necessary for leadership roles. During his performance review meetings, I've tried to provide the kind of honest, developmental feedback I wish I had received years earlier. I focus on specific behaviors, measurable outcomes, and clear expectations for improvement. "Garrett, your analytical work this quarter was solid, but I need to see more evidence of collaborative leadership and accurate project attribution," I told him during our most recent review. He nodded quietly, a very different person from the confident supervisor who once dismissed my potential. The broader transformation at Meridian has been remarkable. Since implementing clearer project attribution systems and advancement pathways, we've reduced turnover by 60% and increased employee satisfaction scores significantly. Several team members have been promoted to leadership positions, including Kevin and Sarah, who now manage their own departments. The talent retention improvements alone have saved Meridian over $2 million annually, while the operational improvements from my original proposals continue generating returns. But the most important lesson from this experience isn't about revenge or career advancement. It's about the compound effect of consistent excellence combined with strategic patience. For 2 years, I documented everything, built genuine competence, and waited for the right opportunity to demonstrate value. I didn't try to tear Garrett down. I focused on building something better that made his limitations obvious by comparison. True leadership isn't about managing perception or consuming others' contributions. It's about creating conditions where talented people can do their best work and receive appropriate recognition for their achievements. Garrett taught me that some people see leadership as a zero-sum game, where others' success threatens their own position. I learned that real leaders understand success is multiplicative. When you develop others effectively, everyone's capabilities expand. Sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming who you were meant to be, despite those who tried to convince you it wasn't possible. Today, when young employees come to me with innovative ideas, I make sure they present directly to senior leadership, because everyone deserves the chance to prove what they're capable of.